George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Israel is bombing 4 Arab countries right now, but the United States says it's struggling to stop a wider regional war. Is Hezbollah defeated following a cataclysmic series of disastrous security blunders and the decapitation of many of the military leaders of the Lebanese resistance group, 100,000 strong, culminating, of course, in the assassination deep underground of the leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah, no ordinary leader. Israel is reportedly about to enter and cross the border of Lebanon, making a ground invasion for the first time since 2006. Will they regret this precipitate decision? Will they regret this series of events which has left the whole world on the edge of a regional war which could easily become an international conflagration? We'll be deep diving into this subject with the aid of excellent guests and your telephone calls. Extra phone calls tonight. 168 people were disappointed hanging on the line on the Mother of All Talk Show's last edition. So fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be the Mother of All Talk Shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the Mother of All Talk Shows, the only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the Mother of All Talk Shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
It was murder most foul, not the killing of Hassan Nasrallah. I'll come to that in a minute. It's a war between Israel and the Lebanese resistance, and you must expect that leaders eventually will be targeted. Although I caution that that is a double-edged sword, and it may even be the case that Netanyahu himself was injured at the Ben Gurion airport last evening on his touching down from New York. Certainly there have been no signs of life of Netanyahu since the Israeli press revealed that either the aircraft or his house appeared to have been struck all the way from Yemen by a ballistic missile attack. So what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And if the Israeli state is really going to murder the heads of countries and organizations around the world, they must expect that they will receive the same in return. But the murder most foul was the 6 high-rise buildings that were reduced to dust and the huge number of civilian casualties that were regarded as mere collateral damage. A bit like an organization, I don't know, Hezbollah, bringing the United Nations building down with every single person in it because Netanyahu was somewhere in the building. Again, about which more later. A bit like the British state destroying the Falls Road and killing everyone who lived there because a leader of the IRA had been suspected of being present on the street. You get my drift. The hundreds, now probably thousands, of Lebanese casualties over the last 72 hours is, of course, an all-out war. Don't be fooled when they say they're bombing Hezbollah. I remember I was in Beirut in 1982 when Israel invaded the country, and how frustrated it felt to see reports that Israel was bombing PLO bases when I knew that they were bombing Palestinian refugee camps. The truth is, they are murdering Lebanese people. They are murdering Muslims, Sunni and Shia. They are murdering Christians. They are bombing the towns and villages in which Jesus walked, including amongst people who still speak the language of Jesus. The Christian world is entirely silent about all of that. Lebanon, a sovereign country, a member of the United Nations, every country in the world has an ambassador in Beirut. It's ordinarily a very nice posting. Are absolutely silent, doing nothing, saying nothing about the reduction, yet again, of an Arab capital city to dust, to ash. And the most silent of all are the other Arab countries in whose league, the Arabs have a league, in whose league Lebanon sits. The entire Muslim world is absolutely silent, struck dumb, and powerless, paralyzed, can do nothing. After 12 months of wholesale slaughter of Palestinian children and women in Gaza, after decades of land grabbing, house demolition, the construction of illegal settlements, nobody is ready to take control of the violent attack dog known as the State of Israel. It is, as I've said before, a vindication of the thesis of my compatriot Mary Shelley, the writer of Dr. Frankenstein, that once you've made Frankenstein, you don't control Frankenstein, he controls you. The monster controls you, and the monster is in charge. There is no doubt at all that the United States is deeply complicit in what has been happening in Lebanon over the last 72 hours. Their aircraft carriers, their warships are just offshore to provide moral and later perhaps material and men for the Israeli war effort in Lebanon. The President of the United States and the Vice President and now presidential candidate Kamala Harris have fully supported the slaughter of the Lebanese. Good luck, Kamala Harris, in the state of Michigan come November the 5th. The United States, the European Union, all of the usual suspects who support the great crimes of Israel to a greater or lesser extent, to the nth degree, are all jointly and severally responsible for the massacres of the Lebanese people. If I seem emotional about this, well, Lebanon is where I came in. I first entered the Arab world, its culture, its religions, its cuisine, its music, everything about it. I entered it through the portal of Lebanon. These Lebanese people are precious to me, and many, many of them are being slaughtered right now. The question is, was it a smart move by Israel? I see the usual suspects, either ISIS and Al-Qaeda supporters, including here in Britain, quite boldly, shooting the ISIS-Al-Qaeda breeze on social media. No algorithmic strangling for them, no shadow banning for them, dancing on the grave of Hassan Nasrallah and his comrades in the leadership of the Lebanese resistance. Zionists, of course, celebrating, but they will not necessarily be celebrating for long. But the liberal intelligentsia are queuing up in the newspapers, in the columns, on social media to declare that Hezbollah is finished. Well, they're making, in my view, a very big mistake. First of all, although Nasrallah is no ordinary leader, he himself built up Hezbollah from a group of young men. When I was in Lebanon in 1982, Hezbollah didn't exist, and no one actually felt any political presence of the majority Shia community in Lebanon. They were out in the cold, had no political voice, no political strength, and definitely no military strength. Hassan Nasrallah changed all of that. he made that small group of young men of the Shia sect of Islam, he made them into a mighty army. And they are still a mighty army. As residents all over Israel found out overnight, the idea that killing Nasrallah, killing 10 or 11 or 12 commanders who unaccountably, 10 of them, were in the same apartment when they were killed, there are deep-seated security blunders at the heart of all of this. It's not my business to advise. It's not even necessarily my business to discuss. But suffice to say, there are security lapses in the Lebanese resistance that one presumes will right now be being plugged. But the idea that killing these commanders meant that the men in the field were now powerless to strike came to a rude end overnight, where hundreds of ballistic missile, as well as the usual Katyushas, as well as the usual drone strikes and so on, Israel was in flames overnight. The airport was hit. Netanyahu's house may have been hit. The towns that never had to run for the aircraft shelters are now this evening in the aircraft shelters. So, militarily speaking, Hezbollah still packs a powerful punch. I'll go further. I'll say to Mr. Netanyahu and his chorus of gangsters around the world, you ain't seen nothing yet. And I firmly believe that. I'm not starry-eyed about any liberation movement's prospects of success. It's not easy to fight and win a revolution. It's not easy to liberate your country. There is no easy walk to freedom, as Nelson Mandela told us on the front cover of his own memoirs. There is no easy walk to freedom. Sacrifices will always have to be made. There is no final victory. There is no final defeat. The struggle continues, and it will continue for a very long time, generation after generation. The idea that a leader like Nasrallah can be easily replaced is, of course, fanciful. It is comparable, I saw this written earlier today, it is comparable to Stalin being killed in the early part of Barbarossa, in the early part of the Second World War. If Stalin had been killed, it would have been a monumental Everestian blow to the morale of the Soviet Union and the leadership of that country, but the Soviet Union would still have prevailed. It would still have made it all the way to Berlin to crush the beast in his lair. That much I'm certain of. A leader like Nasrallah comes along once in 100 years, maybe more than that. His cousin, Safiuddin, who is the new leader of Hezbollah, is reportedly far more radical than Hassan Nasrallah was, which is another lesson to chalk up on the blackboard when we're doing the accounting of this whole thing. I told people, I told Parliament 100 times, make a deal with Arafat, because after Arafat comes the deluge. After Arafat comes people who you will not be able to make a deal with. Nobody listened. They killed Arafat. Nobody listened when they killed Rantisi, the former leader of Hamas. Did Hamas get weaker once their leader were killed? No, they got stronger. They killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, about which more later. Did that finish Hamas? Don't be stupid. Don't be ridiculous. This all stems from an Orientalist misunderestimation, as George W. Bush would put it, of the Muslim character. Now, don't get me wrong. If I'm not starry-eyed about liberation movements, I sure ain't starry-eyed about Muslims. There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. At least 1 billion of them are hypocrites. They care more for this life, this dunya, than for the judgment day. They use Islam to stay in power. They use Islam to enrich themselves. Or they use Islam to control their wives, to control their daughters, to impose a conservative lifestyle, at least on their families. 1 billion hypocrites in the Muslim Ummah. But there's another billion who are absolutely sincere, who love God more than they love life, who love their cause, their religion, their deen more than they love life, who believe in the judgment day, who believe that what counts, what matters, is what happens on that judgment day. What is your destination once you have been judged? There's 1 billion of those. And they are in every Arab country. And they are Sunni and they are Shia. And they are being underestimated by Western commentators and Western political leaders. But I've got to tell you something else. Of the 1 billion who are filled with sincerity and éclat, in that regard at least, in their deep-seated belief that dishonor is worse than death, most of them are Shiites. That's the truth of it. That's why Iran is the only anti-imperialist country to have survived everything for 44 years. That's why Hezbollah has been able to grow from a few men to 100,000 men, armed to the teeth, as Netanyahu will find out if his soldiers cross the border this evening. The Shiites are very deep believers, and they love their martyrs with a passion which is visceral. It is sometimes quite difficult for the Western mind to handle, to see the adulation, to see the flagellation, to see Karbala in the full pilgrimage mode, to see the streets of Lebanon tonight as they mourn in the streets their slain leader Hezbollah. Don't underestimate these people. You'd be a fool if you do. Sure, they killed 10, 12 commanders. Sure, they killed the supreme leader of the movement, of the organization. But they have made thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands more across the region and across the world. I've often said, when people ring me up here saying, "Are you not afraid you're going to be killed?" I said, I'm not afraid of death. What matters is how you die, for what you die, and how many people come to pick up your microphone, your pen, your rifle, once you have fallen. And I mean that. And if I mean it, be sure that the people who support Hezbollah really, really mean it. So Hezbollah is not defeated. If you think that, you are a fool. And last night, and I'm sure again tonight, the full force of what the resistance has to offer Netanyahu will again be on display. But the shoe, which I'll grant you has not yet dropped, is the Iranian shoe. There is a crescent. I wrote about it in 1982 or 3. I coined the phrase, a crescent of crisis, stretching from Iran all the way to the Levant. An axis of resistance which forms a crescent and which has powerful players within it. In Iraq, who have scarcely begun to speak, but if you're an American watching with a son in the American bases in Iraq, you have to do everything that you can to get your government to withdraw them before another Benghazi to the power of 10 occurs. In Yemen, who have proven themselves, not to me because I always knew it, but to others, the Yemenis are possibly, pound for pound, though the poorest country in the world, possibly the best fighters in the whole world are the Yemenis. And they're proving it again in this war of attrition. Damascus was bombed. Today we don't yet know the details, just that it was a powerful explosion in the middle of Damascus. It may be that Netanyahu intends to open a Syrian front, in which case, again, he is underestimating not just the Syrians, but the resolve of their Russian allies. Russia will never abandon Syria. They've come too far. Russia was an ally of Syria for 54 years. They're not going to relinquish that position. They have military bases there. They have naval bases there, Air Force bases there. They have many troops there. And they have many anti-aircraft batteries of S-400s that can bring down every F-35 that Israel or the United States puts into the skies. Russia will fight for Syria. So if they intend to include Syria in their battle plans, they're again going to have a rude awakening. But the big shoe is the Iranian shoe. Some people are laughing at Iran's failure to respond. There's ample reason to believe that if Iran had responded after the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, that Hassan Nasrallah might still be alive today, because a new deterrence might have been established. But Iran will answer. And when Iran answers, then we've got a regional war. Stay tuned. This is the mother of all talk shows. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, a staggering poll is now running for the mother of all talk shows. 36,000 people have already voted. And I'm only just announcing it. Is Hezbollah defeated? Yes or no? 36,000 votes in already. Let's make this a record poll, shall we? Let's try and get this over 40,000, even higher than that. Answer yes or no on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please share with your contacts, your friends on YouTube, and ditto on Facebook and on other platforms that allow you to do so. Please, I'm trying to get to 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. Not that I'll get a plaque or anything. I didn't even get my plaque for the 100,000. I don't care about plaques in life, but I do want to influence the algorithmic suppression to which we are routinely subjected. And the more subscribers we have, the more we'll be heard and seen in the world. The telephone number, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the number for the rest of the world is 0044 203 966 2625. Rachel Blevins is probably my favorite American journalist and political commentator, and a very popular guest here on the mother of all talk shows, and she is with us, I'm glad to say, again tonight. Rachel, your country is no longer pretending to be a bystander or an observer in all of this. Both Biden and Harris rushed out their support for what Israel is doing in Lebanon. They're doing it with American airplanes. They're doing it with American bombs. They're doing it on American money. So it's actually America that's at war with Lebanon, not just Israel. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for having me again. When you watch the statements that are put out, I mean, there's no condemnation. And again, there hasn't been any condemnation for weeks now, as we've seen Israel carry out terror attacks involving exploding pagers, to then this last week, I mean, they killed over 700 people in Lebanon in just a matter of days. The overwhelming majority of them were civilians. And then we get to Friday's attack. And, you get these initial reports out talking about Israel flattening entire apartment buildings in southern Beirut. And the question becomes, okay, how are they doing this, right? What bombs are they using? And then it comes out that they're using these special 2,000-pound bombs referred to as bunker buster bombs, because essentially they hit the ground and then they detonate. They were specifically looking for the underground tunnels or bunkers that they believed that Syed Hassan Nasrallah was in. At this point, they got it right. A lot of questions about how that came to be and what intelligence was involved. But those bombs are specifically made in the U.S., and they were actually included in a shipment that the Biden administration sent over in December of last year. So in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, we saw the U.S. really ramp up the arsenal that it was sending to Israel. That included these 2,000-pound bombs, which are illegal under the Geneva Convention. So the U.S. is violating international law just to send these bombs to Israel. Israel is violating international law using them. And you look around at the international community, and the sheer lack of condemnation combined with, as you noted there, these statements that we got from Biden, from Harris, from John Kirby, all coming out and saying, oh, we support Israel, right? John Kirby claimed that the assassination of Nasrallah, that was good for the world and good for the region. And it's like, these people, they have the ability, the privilege, I would say, to just sit back here in the U.S. and to watch as the Middle East goes up in flames, because they're profiting off of all of it. But I think the question now becomes where we go from here if Israel actually does try to pursue a ground invasion, because exactly as you were noting there in your intro, every single time that the resistance is knocked down, it comes back stronger. And that may not happen immediately. It may not happen as quickly as people want it to, but history has shown that the resistance cannot be defeated. And I think that that's something that all of the neocons and hawks in Washington, they really need to start paying attention to history, because as it stands right now with the conflict and the war crimes that Israel has carried out and ignited in this region, it is not going to be good for them in the long run.
Well, you can cut down the flowers, but you can't stop spring, of course. And people who are resisting a foreign invader, a foreign occupier, are never going to give up their resistance, and eventually they will prevail, especially when the occupier, the invader, is only able to occupy, able to invade, because other countries give them all the means of doing so, and free gratis at that. Eventually, there must come a time when the United States gets a politician who comes along and says, put America first, make America great again. We are in a situation where your bridges and your dams are crumbling and being destroyed. Your trains are going off the tracks. Your roads are filled with holes. while you're giving billions to Benjamin Netanyahu? It doesn't make any sense. Can't last forever, that.
It does not make any sense. I'm with you. I mean, this week alone, we're dealing with a hurricane. There's massive destruction on the East Coast, specifically in North Carolina. It's being hit really hard. And yet, what is the Biden administration doing? Oh, they're announcing another $8.7 billion in military aid for Israel. They're announcing another $8 billion in military aid for Ukraine. And it's like you look at the top of the political ticket, right? We know Joe Biden. We know that he has bragged that he is a Zionist, that he's proud of it for Israel. We know that he's not going to stop fighting a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. But then the question becomes, okay, we also know that Biden's not going to be in office come January of 2025. So who is going to replace him? Well, on one hand, we have Kamala Harris, who basically is exactly like Biden. She is the exact establishment creature. She's made it clear she's going to stand with Israel, provide more bombs, stand with Ukraine, send even more bombs, no matter what it means for the U.S. And then we look at Donald Trump. And as you noted there, look, Trump has figured out the American people want a populist candidate. We want an anti-establishment candidate. And so he's run on this platform of America first. And that's something that a lot of Americans say, yes, finally, we want that. And then along the way, he runs into Israel. And if we've learned anything about Trump's first administration, his first 4 years in office, not only was he pro-Israel, but he let his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, basically run his Middle East policy. He said, yeah, I don't care if we illegally recognize the occupied Golan Heights or if we move the U.S. embassy to West Jerusalem. I don't care what the U.S. does there as long as we continue on with the support of Israel. And so when I look at where the U.S. is headed, it's extremely concerning to me to see these top two candidates who wouldn't do anything different than what the current U.S. administration under Biden, or I guess really Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin and all of the rest of them, is actually doing. To see the fact that even with just Trump's statements that he's putting out right now, he's not condemning Israel. He's just saying, oh, the war in Lebanon needs to stop, right? He's just saying, oh, the wars need to stop. It's all fine and good to say that you want to see an end to people dying. But if you don't have a fundamental understanding, and if you can't communicate that to the people as to how we got to this point, and in this case, who the aggressor is, who is also on top of that sending those bombs that are being used on heavily populated civilian areas, then what Trump is really telling the world is that he would do no different if he was in office. It doesn't matter if he gets a few more people in his cabinet who are, calling out the hypocrisy of the war in Ukraine and U.S. support for it. What matters is that his foreign policy would not fundamentally change when it comes to Israel. And that seems to be the key here of why Trump is allowed to get into office in the first place, is because the U.S. establishment at its core knows that nothing will fundamentally change. And I think that that's something that a lot more Americans need to be paying attention to here.
Now, you know American politics better than me, of course, but my reading of, say, the state of Michigan is that Kamala Harris's candidature is now dead in the water in the state of Michigan, or dead in the blood of thousands of Lebanese people with her support, with her administration's weapons, her administration's aircraft, her administration's money. When she signed that statement supporting Israel's war in Lebanon, she could kiss the state of Michigan goodbye, and maybe others. What do you think?
Oh, I'm with you on that one. It's interesting to see kind of how this has come about in the U.S. because during the Democratic primaries, we had this creation of the uncommitted movement, right? A group of people came out and they said, look, Joe Biden at the time, who was the only nominee that the Democratic Party wanted, they said, you know what, we can't vote for him. He's allowing a genocide to be carried out by Israel, enabled by the U.S., and really carried out by the U.S. as well. Therefore, we are just going to put uncommitted on our ballots. We're not going to vote for anyone. We're going to stick it to the Democratic Party. Well, as they did that, that seemed all fine and good at the time, up until in recent weeks you had the uncommitted movement come out and they said, well, we clearly can't endorse Harris because she's no different than Biden, right? She may speak a little bit differently and claim that she cares about the Palestinians, but the heart of her policies, they're no different. We can't endorse Donald Trump because he's also no different. But then they put in there a little clause in their statement saying, well, we also aren't really encouraging you to vote third party. We're actually encouraging you to do everything you can to stop Donald Trump because we believe that he would be worse. So in a way, they're endorsing Harris, but not really endorsing her. And it just reminds me of the place that American people are in, looking at this upcoming contest and still claiming that they have to choose the lesser of two evils when the results are still evil. So I think when it comes down to a state like Michigan, what you're ultimately going to see is very low voter turnout. You may see increased turnout for third-party candidates. We do have Jill Stein for the Green Party, and we do have Chase Oliver for the Libertarian Party, who are calling this what it is, a genocide carried out by Israel along with the U.S. They are making that statement very clearly, so I do think that you could see increased support for them, but I also think that at the end of the day, you're going to see a lot of Americans just stay home because they look at the top of the ticket, they ask the question of what is actually going to change at the end of the day if they genuinely care about U.S. foreign policy. And the answer when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Lebanon, when it comes to Palestine, the answer is nothing is expected to actually change.
Rachel Blevins, as always, thanks very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let's take a quick break and then we'll go to the state of Michigan and talk to Joe in Detroit. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Now you get that film and Killing Kelly, the killings of Tony Blair, Killing Kelly, you get that absolutely free if you support my Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway. All proceeds used to keep the mother of all talk shows going. That means we need you to subscribe to patreon.com/George Galloway. Is Hezbollah defeated? Yes or no? Now, it is pretty overwhelming that the answer is no, but the number of people who vote, well, that is going to be significant and watched across the world. So get voting now. Let's go to the phones. Joe is in Detroit, Michigan. Much discussed. Joe, what do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the assassination of Syed Hassan Nasrallah. The U.S. murdered the greatest living Arab leader. He rose from humble beginnings to lead his people out of civil war and found the greatest guerrilla army in modern history. And his kind of leadership is unfortunately unique among world leaders today. He was full of integrity, honesty, and even had a great sense of humor that consoled us in our hardest of times. But we shouldn't despair, because his kind of leadership isn't the kind that just springs forth from the mind of one man. It's a kind of leadership that's built by a great social movement and the sacrifices of the masses of the Arab people. And wherever there's an Arab who chooses dignity over dishonor and occupation, Hassan Nasrallah is there.
Well, I think that you're right to mark the unique qualities of Hassan Nasrallah, especially in the context of the moral and political dwarfs who rule almost all of the Arab world, from the Atlantic all the way to the Gulf. To be the greatest Arab leader, which undoubtedly he was, it's not that difficult in the current circumstances, at least. It's true that he had a tremendous sense of humor, tremendously charismatic, inspiring. He, by sheer force of his personality, forged Hezbollah by his will. And therefore, as I said at the beginning, it's no small matter to lose such a leader. I don't know why he was underneath the Hezbollah headquarters, even 30 meters below the Hezbollah headquarters. If I had been advising him, I would have said the Hezbollah headquarters is the least safe place in the world for the leader to be, especially a leader well nigh irreplaceable. I'll go further. Not many will agree with me. I don't think he even should have been in Lebanon. So important was he to the cause. I'd have had him in a Russian Air Force bunker in Syria. But that's just me. I know why he would want to be on Lebanese soil. I know why the Lebanese would want him to be on Lebanese soil. But in these days of video and all the rest, you can be anywhere. And you can still be present everywhere. So I think that you're right in the way that you have described his impact, his eloquence, his inspiration, his charisma, his sense of humor. He achieved great things. He was 64 years old, the same age as the Prophet Muhammad, as someone pointed out. He was, I think, the same age as General Hajj Soleimani. That's all probably a coincidence, but 64 is a common age for the death of these three. So he would have lived another 10 years, another 15. He would have wanted to die as a martyr. If martyrdom means anything, and I believe that it does, he is surely in heaven now with the Lord. It's not a bad place to be in this rotten world of ours. The loss is not his. The loss is the Lebanese people and the cause of resistance and liberation around the world. In that, there are many, many millions of losers. Thanks, Joe, for the opportunity to say that. The podcast is doing fantastically well. We're in the top 30 in China again this week. I mean, I'm asking you, do you know how many people speak English in China? We're in the top 30 again this week. We're in the top 40 in South Africa and in Portugal, in the top 10 in Luxembourg. Who knew Luxembourg was such a hotbed of radical television? Now you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code in the corner of your screen now. Let's go to Canada and talk to Salman. Go ahead, Salman.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. How are you, sir?
By the grace of God, good, thank you.
Good. Yeah, I just wanted to share my view. Basically, one doesn't have to be a political analyst to see the frightening reality of the conflict going on. So my point of view is, now, the assassination of Nasrallah, never mind crossing over international boundaries with Lebanon, I'd say that's the powder keg that Israel lit. And now, does anybody think that Iran or anybody from Hezbollah is going to just take a back seat to that? The answer is no, in my opinion. I'm not a supporter of these factions of Hezbollah or Iran per se, but the thing is that its war is spilling into wider areas in the Middle East, and then Iran is also backed by Russia. And then you had a few weeks ago on MOATS, you had a political analyst or a former U.S. intelligence analyst was saying how UK wanted to supply something to the Ukrainians, and how close we are to nuclear war. Like the end, it's just so frightening to see that. And on top of that,
Indeed.
Two small little points here is that I watched a movie. I think the BBC broadcasted it back in the 80s, called Threads, about nuclear war during the Cold War era, right? Yeah. And it's bloody frightening. So if everybody was to watch that and like vote against the UK government to even get involved in this. And lastly, in the Talk Sport days, you did a chilling statement to a person who was like saying, oh yeah, we got to attack Iran. I think they were American. And you said one statement, the Straits of Hormuz will be on fire. And people don't realize that, like the energy that we get from the Middle East and all the oil that goes around the world. Yeah. I mean, it would cause an energy crisis, but this time not by King Faisal.
Well, I'm glad that you remembered that, Salman, and that you brought it up this evening. This regional war is not some computer games. It means that the credit ratings of countries like Israel fall to the lowest ever level. I mean, Moody's have just declassified Israel's credit rating to the point of junk. Only someone who wanted to invest in junk would invest in Israel, according to Moody's. But the United States will not be far behind that. A regional war will mean a collapse in the U.S. currency's value. It will mean a vast boost to the price of gold. It will mean that you will not be able to get petrol or diesel in your petrol station, not at any price at all, because the producers nearby, America's allies, I don't want to name them, but they know who they are, those who are actively collaborating with the state of Israel, those who are prepared to allow America to use their airspace, their sea, their waters, they'll all be on fire. So there'll be no oil and gas coming from those countries. That will end instantly. Anything which is already on the water will not proceed any further. The Straits of Hormuz will be on fire. The Red Sea will be on fire. So don't think about when you're going to get your Amazon package. You'll be lucky to get it this year or at all. Don't think about your factory being able to continue its production. Those old enough to will remember the quadrupling of the oil price in 1973, thanks to the wise leadership then of Saudi Arabia. 4 times our oil price went up, and it crippled industry in Western countries, particularly in Britain, for decades thereafter. And that's before we talk about the danger of the nuclear war that you talked about there. It's before we contemplate that. It's really kinetic, if you think about it. If Israel attacks Syria Russia will defend Syria. If Russia defends Syria, America will defend Israel. Bang. There you have a war between the two superpowers. If Iran attacks in a strategically significant way the Islamic Republic of Iran, Russia will support Iran. Maybe China will too, but Russia definitely will. And the axis of resistance that I spoke about in my monologue will be all guns blazing. Israel, pardon me, is a tiny country. It's only 7 million Israeli citizens. It's a tiny country. There's 91 million people in Iran, and more than half of them are under 30. It's a young country, a vast country, with a huge military-industrial complex and capacity. Even the Yemenis, tribesmen with daggers in their belt, wearing sandals, are landing ballistic missiles in Tel Aviv. Those who have been celebrating over the last 24 hours or so are definitely prematurely ejaculating their joy. Nell Lowe says British intelligence most likely the ones who gave Israel Nasrallah's location. But how should British intelligence know where the leader of Hezbollah is? These are very sensitive issues. I don't intend to deep dive into them in public, but the security questions that arise, not just for Hezbollah, but for Iran, whose deputy commander of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, deputy commander was in the bunker with Hassan Nasrallah. Why? Why do two such high-value people have to be in the same room? Why was the president of Iran in the same helicopter as the foreign minister of Iran? I mean, even Prince Andrew doesn't fly on the same plane as Prince Edward, and the loss of one or both of them would not be nearly as significant, not to put too fine a point on it. Why is the leader underneath the party headquarters? There are many places that the party leader could have been under the ground that would have been safer than the party headquarters. I don't want to add to the pain of the liberation movements, of the resistance movements, but I oftentimes remember how the Vietnamese leadership never saw daylight for years. The Vietnamese leadership spent their entire war under the ground. Because if you are a leader of a revolutionary war, you really cannot do things that ordinary people can do. You can't sit and have a meeting in an apartment. You can't go to sleep in an apartment in the middle of a war. I'll say no more about that. I may have said too much already. Brian Holden says Lebanon supports Gaza and has every right to defend itself from the settlers' incursion. Claire Gillies says at this point, I've given up believing a solitary country will do anything to stop this. All Arab countries are abject cowards, minus Yemen. And Syria too, Claire. 1984, Sarajevo says Netanyahu has opened the gates of hell. The US has buried its credibility in the mass grave of Rafah. The finale will take place in the Middle East, where all the major powers will meet. Yes, it may be, who knows, that we're headed for the end of times. Kind of feels like it, doesn't it? Matthew is in New York. Something to say about my monologue. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hey, George, how you doing?
Good, sir, good.
Can you hear me? Hey, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey,
You're on the air.
I love you. You're my hero. I'm not looking to knock heads about your monologue. I just wanted to comment on the how you said the Muslim Ummah is weak. I I'm not going to argue with you there. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said we're going to be in great numbers and we'll be weak. But, you know, you said 1 billion Muslims, you know, sitting back. I feel, you know, I have a home in Egypt also. You know, a lot of these Muslims are also shackled. Places like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Morocco, Egypt, they would love to do more. But if they speak up, you know, they could be imprisoned. A lot of the leaders,
so what?
Muslim Brotherhood.
Sorry, Matthew. Sorry, Matthew. So what? So what if they would be in prison? Do you believe or do you not believe? Do you believe in a judgment day or do you not believe in it? Are you going to say on the judgment day, I didn't do anything because they would have put me in prison? You think that excuse will pass muster? It will not.
No, you're right. You're right. And I'm with you. I'm with you. It's a lot easier for me in the U.S. here to speak up. Okay, I'm 100% with you. But what I'm saying is, now you're saying the Shias are standing up, and they are, because they're also not influenced by these animals in the U.S. and Europe. All these leaders of these nations also, you know the deal, they bought into the West. They bought into the U.S. They're corrupt despots. I'm not looking to argue with you, George.
Well, you are in a way. Matthew, listen, Mandela said on the front of his book, there is no easy walk to freedom. It's not an apple that falls from the tree. You have to shake the tree or the apple will not fall. You have to pay a price. Hassan Nasrallah just gave his life. His daughter just gave her life. All these martyrs are giving their lives. Don't talk to me about shackles by these tin pot hypocrite dictatorships in the Arab world. But thanks for the call. I love you. Zaid in Watford wants to talk about Nasrallah. Go ahead, Zaid.
Good evening, sir. How are you? It's an honor to talk to you.
By the grace of God, good. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment and probably clarify and educate, you know, the audience on why the Muslim nations are not rising up in solidarity. Now, this is what is happening at the moment is basically a proxy sectarian war, as I see it, by the alliance of Saudi Arabia with America and Israel on one side against what the former Saudi foreign minister, Prince Turki, called back in 2010, remember, as the Shia Crescent, stretching from Iran to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and also including Yemen now with the Houthis, and even for a time Bahrain. So, and as exemplified by the two maps that Benjamin Netanyahu showed at the UN speech, where he showed one map of the good guys in the Middle East, and they had Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Sudan, and Jordan in nice friendly green, and the other map that he showed was of in the evil black and white was the evil Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon and Yemen. So the way I see it, the assassination of Nasrallah, like the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, like the pager bombings that happened in Beirut, must have all been done with insider help, insider jobs, be it...
Possibly, although the Norwegian government has issued an arrest warrant for an Indian businessman who actually sold those pagers and walkie-talkies and other devices into Lebanon. So India, or at least an Indian national, is involved in this picture too. I honestly see no reason to single out Saudi Arabia in this regard. Saudi Arabia has refused to normalize relations with Israel, despite the efforts of Jared Kushner and Donald Trump, and despite the fact that their neighbors, their close neighbors, have done so. So Saudi Arabia is not itself waging this sectarian proxy war. Others are. Saudi Arabia has recently restored diplomatic relations with Iran. That's a significant point. Saudi Arabia is now closer than it has ever been to Russia and China. Saudi Arabia may be a BRICS country by next year, by the end of next year. So whilst there's much to condemn in Saudi Arabia, by comparison with some of their neighbors, they don't deserve to be singled out for blame. And my third point is, whilst it's true that many of the strugglers against the empire and its savage dog in the region are Shiites, many are not. Some of my closest friends in Beirut have been struggling all of their lives, like Dr. Ma'an Bashur, for example. He's a Christian. Suleiman Frangieh is a Christian. General Aoun is a Christian. There are many Sunni Arab nationalists who define themselves as Nasarites or Baathists, who are also firmly in this fight. And last, but by no means least, none of the resistance in Palestine are Shiites, and they are fighting hardest and for the longest of all. Never forget that. A quick break, I think, and then I'll be back with more of your phone calls and a wonderful American guest, Anya Parampil. Stay tuned, I'll be right back.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. These type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is, to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists, and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is Hezbollah defeated? That's the poll this evening. 37,715 of you have already voted. The voting runs like this. On Telegram, 93% say no. On X, on Twitter, 77% say no. On the YouTube community poll, 88% say no, and on the YouTube stream, 87% say no. So the result is not in doubt, it would appear, just a quantum. I really would like this poll to get to 40,000. So if you haven't voted yet, please vote on my Telegram, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Grappentine says, I ask everyone to watch Max Blumenthal's speech at the Rage Against the War rally this year. Well, we don't have Max, but we've got his missus, Anya Parampil, a powerful journalist, political commentator, and author of Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. Anya, welcome. Well, look, tell us put us out of our misery. What did your husband say at the Rage Against the War?
It's always good to be with you, George. I hope that we can one day see you in person in the UK, even though I fear about traveling there these days. Max gave a brilliant speech yesterday, and it was just encouraging to see so many voices in the United States rallying, not only here in Washington, D.C., but in New York as well. There was a Peace and Freedom rally put on by Gerald Celente, featuring voices such as Andrew Napolitano, the judge and former Fox News host who now is a very popular podcaster, and people coming across different political stripes, or at least what we thought were our political stripes or divides in the past. For example, Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute standing alongside me and Max yesterday in DC, and saying that it's really time that we put aside any of these differences that we thought we had, or perceived differences that sometimes feel as if they're projected on us from the top down, in order to call out our common enemy, which is this government in the United States that has completely abandoned any pretext of representing the American people and thrown its entire weight behind the Zionist entity in the Middle East, even if it means nuclear war, dead U.S. troops, and all-out war with Iran. This is the same group that is testing war with Russia, moving Russia to reevaluate its nuclear protocol, because under Biden's leadership, the U.S. has allowed Ukraine to wage war on Russia, now even within Russia's own borders. So it's a very scary time to be an American, because it feels as if we don't have any choice here. As much as in the past Donald Trump called out the deep state, it seems that he's now embedded with Zionism more than ever, completely owned by his top donor, Miriam Adelson, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who just went on X last night and called for the U.S. to support an invasion of Lebanon as just a blatant Zionist, someone who attempted to negotiate these failed peace accords in the Middle East that were really nothing more than a real estate deal for his family. So it's now a time more than ever for Americans to speak out. And what Max really drove home is that the Palestinians are a canary in the coal mine. This group of people that are running our government and running the governments in Europe as well are testing their technology, whether it's surveillance or weapons, on the Palestinian people, because it'll ultimately be, these weapons and these tools will be turned against anyone who resists, whether that's you or me in Britain or the United States or people beyond. And it is imperative that Americans stand up to this. And Max said, especially as an American Jew, he cannot forgive Israel for what they have done, for changing the way that we even look at our own child, because every day we are forced to look at the video of children that look just like her being pulled out of the rubble of Gaza, and now Lebanon as well. And it feels like there's no breaks. And so this is the time to speak as loudly as we can. And that's why I'm so grateful for your program and for other people who are not pulling any punches right now.
Thank you. The sojourn on X by Kushner was quite extraordinary, both in its length and in the scope of what it said. You're right. The son-in-law of the next president of the United States, one presumes, we'll come back to that, who'll be living more or less in the White House, except when he's not on personal missions to Saudi Arabia and so on. In this X post, Kushner openly calls for Israel to conquer Lebanon. In the week that the Jerusalem Post, extraordinarily, they've now removed it after 3 days, extraordinarily claimed, the Jerusalem Post claimed that God promised Lebanon to the Jewish people. that Lebanon is part of the promised land and that Israel must conquer it. This is quite astounding stuff from a guy who's going to have a lot of influence in a second-term Trump presidency, isn't it?
It's terrifying because we already saw what danger Jared Kushner can bring. This is a man who not only is on the front end of terror, whether it's for advocating these kinds of wars or putting up the ridiculous normalization agreement between the so-called Arab states and Israel, but he then comes in on the back end and makes money through his real estate ventures developing the countries that are destroyed. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a piece of Ukraine. But he said himself also that it's time to develop Gaza's beachfront property, as if he has the right to do that. This is a man who also was bragging about recently on X that he designed the new and revived Serbian capital because of the destruction that NATO wrought on the country in the 1990s. So he's cashing in on death. That's Jared Kushner. And other than that, his family are just a bunch of slumlords in the United States, criminals. And these are the people that really propelled Trump. I don't think Trump would have become as powerful or influential if he is if it weren't for these figures around him, particularly the Kushners and the Adelson money network. Trump himself was bailed out by these forces, and now that he's bankrupted or being threatened to be bankrupted, he's going to have to lean on them even more heavily. And so it can't be overstated, the danger of Jared Kushner. And I think Trump should also question who was leaking on him throughout his entire time in the White House. There were many incidents that when it came to his peace initiatives, for example, reaching out to the Russians before he came into office in order to tamp down tension between Washington and Moscow, that information was leaked, and one of the only figures that was privy to it was Jared Kushner. And so he's not really someone that I think even cares about the president. He just cares about his own self-interest and that of his family. And this is also, it's just so shocking to be an American today and see the mask lifted.
Well, it's not much easier being British, let me tell you. The electoral impact of all of this seems to me, I put this to Rachel Blevins earlier, but I'd like your view on it. I know Michigan, state of Michigan, quite well. I don't know other states around about like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and so on. But it does seem to me that Kamala Harris, glorying in the blood of the Lebanese people, kills her candidature in the state of Michigan. Unless I need to get out more in the state. There are hundreds of thousands of Lebanese, never mind Arabs, Muslims, Lebanese. Even the cops are Lebanese in Dearborn. Even the cops have got pictures of Hassan Nasrallah in their cop cars in Dearborn, Michigan. And Kamala Harris, glorying in what's happened in Lebanon, surely she cannot win that state.
Very well. And yeah, the community there runs deep. I know my mother, for example, she teaches English as a second language, and in the 2000s, she was teaching Iraqi nuns that had fled the U.S. invasion of Iraq, their own country, and talked about how before 2003, they were safe, and their neighbors maybe were of a different faith, but everybody was able to get along, but that our presence there and our support for extremists in the region is what placed them in danger. And I agree with you that Kamala's strategy in Michigan is in jeopardy. I saw the mayor of Hamtramck, Michigan, who's an Arab but a Democrat, recently endorsed Donald Trump. And actually his younger daughter, Tiffany, is married into an influential Arab family. And as a result, it seems that some influential even leaders of mosques and other people in the community have endorsed Trump. Now, that might not actually translate into votes for Trump, because I think many Arabs also know that Trump will maybe know better. And it seems that both parties are captured by Zionists. And the one voice for peace that we have consistently or had is Jill Stein running in the Green Party. But I was very dismayed recently to see a statement that she made after she was baited by Mehdi Hassan into denouncing Putin and Assad and equating them to Netanyahu. Even though she attempted to stand her ground in that interview, her campaign then turned around and released a statement denouncing Assad and placing, every world leader that's bad, in her view, in the category of Netanyahu. And I think that greatly undermined her campaign, because unfortunately, some of these influential Muslim groups here that, for example, were very pro-Syria war, regime change when it served their sectarian interests, have a lot of influence, and they pulled her aside basically and said, if you don't take our line on this, then we're not going to support you. And that doesn't necessarily represent the Arab community as a whole. Not all Arabs fall into the category of CAIR and these other groups. And as you say, a lot of them actually are Lebanese Christian in Michigan, and they know that Hassan Nasrallah was responsible for preserving Christianity and these communities in Syria, where I visited, for example, Malula, the ancient Syrian Christian city where they still speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ, to this day. And Max and I spoke with nuns who had been held hostage by al-Qaeda terrorists. We stood in the hotel that al-Qaeda terrorists had taken over and used as their base of operations. And it was Hezbollah and the Syrian army, with assistance from Hezbollah and Russia, that prevented that town from essentially being wiped off the map. And people here know that. The influential groups may not want people like Jill Stein to understand that, but the average citizen does. And it just, again, goes to show that these influential groups have captured all of our parties, even the progressive parties, and it's very dismaying time to be an American.
Well, I've been in the Vatican many times, but Malula is the holiest place I have ever been. It's by far and away the most spiritual place that I have ever been. And ISIS and Al-Qaeda would have had their black flag flying over it, and every nun and every priest would be in the ground if it were not for the Syrian Arab army, Hezbollah, and their Russian ally. Which brings me to my last point, Anya, because it's a very busy show tonight. If the ground invasion goes on, if Iran finally speaks, will the United States engage in all-out war on behalf of Netanyahu just a few weeks before a presidential election?
I don't think the U.S. public would have the appetite for it, but unfortunately, I think the way that the Biden administration has been playing these wars is that they're using the Ukrainians in Ukraine to have their war with Russia because they know they can't afford any U.S. body bags, and they're allowing Israel to continue to push the limit of its boundaries. Now, I mean, years ago, I think Americans would have laughed at the idea that Greater Israel was a serious plan, but I don't think there's any denying it now that the Israelis are very serious about establishing, taking away as much of the surrounding land and establishing their idea of a biblical land. I mean, they're doing it in front of our eyes and they're saying it, like you say, and then deleting it. They can't hide anymore. But if we get American body bags back, and unfortunately it might have to come to that, then I think there will be a real crisis in the United States. We were already facing a crisis because of our engagement in Iraq. This will be another level of terror and war in the region, and also something that I think American troops and American soldiers will feel in a way that I don't want it to come to that. But if Americans are just going to sit on their hands and fall for this regime change propaganda once again, I don't see it playing out in any other way. But the tragedy is, again, that if it results in a backlash against terrorists and an election of Trump, I'm not confident that we'll get any other policy. This this is a government that has been hijacked, and there's no way to press the brakes.
Anya Parampil,
I hope that the
as
US will not
always,
do it.
wonderful to talk to you. Journalist, political commentator, and author of a very fine book, Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. Thank you, Anya. Karen Murphy says Max's speech was brilliant and brave. Judge Napolitano did an excellent speech too. If anyone knows the judge, get him to come on MOATS. We've been trying to get him for years. Laura Santillan says it was an awesome Max Blumenthal speech. We must hear that. TV Claudadana says, great guest, Anya Parampil. Best wishes for her and Max Blumenthal. Abel Malcolm says, Anya Parampil is spot on. Spot on. Everything she says, just spot on. Quick break, and then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, a staggering 41,467 people have now voted in our poll. I don't know if that's a record, but it's climbing up towards it. Is Hezbollah defeated? The vast majority of you say no, and I believe that you are right. But have your say, yes or no, on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, Al is in Sweden to talk about Nasrallah. I told you this is the global university of the airwaves. Al, what have you got to say?
Hello, Mr. George. Thank you so much for having me on the show. You are truly inspiring, and we have learned so much from you through the years. The recent passing of the greatest leader at all has been deeply devastating for everyone, and it leaves us really wondering, will things ever improve? Will Iran ever find the strength to make a difference? I apologize for the hesitance, but seeing how people handle this in social media, for example, it's really hard to stay hopeful. I would love to hear your perspective on this and what we can expect moving forward, because it seems that, it's not like before anymore. There was no response from Iran yet, at least, and I'm not sure I put it on well.
No, it's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question, though there are many in Iran who will not like us asking it, will not like me asking it, but I have to ask, I have an obligation to my audience to ask it. I tend to follow Professor Said Mohammed Marandi, regular guest on the show. I believe he's a sincere man, and I believe he's a well-informed man. And so until I detect any sign on his part that Iran's shoe will not drop, that Iran will not answer, then I'll go on believing that they will. But I did make the point earlier, I make it again, though it will be, as I say, very unpopular. If a response to the murder of Ismail Haniyeh had already been made, then Hassan Nasrallah might still be alive today, because it would have made Israel think twice about what they are doing now in Lebanon. I firmly believe that. So I don't know. Some people say there's a 5D chess game. Some people say they're determined not to be brought into a trap and so on. But if you're going to demonstrate an ability to deter someone who is routinely murdering your top people and maiming them, ambassadors, generals, commanders, maybe president, maybe foreign minister, and certainly your chief guest, the leader of the Palestinian resistance. If you're not going to respond to that, then you're not going to respond to anything. So you might as well give Israel the keys. And I don't believe that Iran will do that. I believe that Iran will answer, and I believe that Iran will answer soon. But there's 5 days of mourning in Iran. Presumably they will not answer during that period of mourning, or maybe they will. Thanks, Al, for that call. Violetta Khalil says, Beirut is the most beautiful city in the world. I hope all Lebanese people will emigrate to the UK, which is complicit in all of this. This point, Violetta, is simply missed by all these right-wing, knuckle-dragging lunatics that support Israel here in Britain. They're the same people that are in an uproar about the number of refugees that arrive in Britain. How many Syrian and Lebanese and Palestinian refugees do you think will be landing here as a result of your support for Israel, you idiots? Michel Sharon says, first came across you in 1982, Mr. Galloway, when the Zionists were shelling Beirut. Small demo in Glasgow from the Central Mosque to the bandstand on the other side of the river. Michel, I remember it well. Jürgen is in Canada on Nasrallah. Jürgen, welcome.
Hi, Mr. Moats. Thank you so much. First time caller. You're in danger of being a very good man. Just to let you know. I'm a patriot. I'm originally from British Guiana. I was born and raised there. I'm a patriot. Just to let you know that I still have my friends and so on. And I was told with very, very respectable sources that it was the King of Jordan who gave up Hassan Nasrallah location. And I'm not afraid. I'm 60 now.
How would he know it?
I'm retired.
How would he know it?
These guys got their way of communication and so on and so forth. Being a patriot.
Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that allegation is true. I've seen no evidence of it. But nobody should know the whereabouts of Hassan Nasrallah. Never mind the little king of Jordan. Nobody should know it. He should have, as he did have, and they perished with him, loyal and dedicated bodyguards, and only they should know where a man like Hassan Nasrallah is. Not any Tom, Dick, Harry, or King. Last word to you, Jürgen.
Yes, Mr. Moats. I agree with you, and I respect your decision. But my information, I still have to believe them.
Okay, well, we'll see. It'll all come out in the wash. I very much doubt it. I don't think the King of Jordan knows how to find his own arse, never mind where Hassan Nasrallah is. Jad is in Lebanon and wants to talk about Lebanon, not unnaturally. Jad, welcome.
Hello there.
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to say...
Go on, you're on the air.
First of all, I would like to say, may Allah magnify everyone's rewards. I am currently in Lebanon, and I come from the southern of Lebanon. And today, our hearts are very heavy with grief, and our spirits are bruised by the tragic loss of our beloved leader, Sayyid Hassan. For those of us who knew him and admired him and drew strength from his presence, this moment is not just a political tragedy, it is a deep personal loss. It was not merely just a figurehead or a distant leader. Sayyid Hassan was a man who lived for his people, whose every word and action was rooted in his love for us and his unwavering dedication to justice and his profound belief in the power of faith and resistance. To the world, he might be just another political leader, but to us, he was the safety of this country, and he was our hope. And over this air, I would just like to send one message, that even though Sayyid Hassan is now in a way better place in Jannat al-Khuld, inshallah, our resistance is not going to fall, and we will keep moving forward no matter the cost.
I mean, I believe that to be true. Of course, I send my condolences to the people of Lebanon. This is a heavy blow. But look, we all lose our father. But our father is still here. And Sayyid Hassan is still here. His ideas, his speeches, his videos, his political line, his method of operation, his inspiration, they are all still here and will be here forever and ever. And he is in, as you say, a better place now. We all lose our father. We wish that they live to 84 or 94 rather than 64. We wish that they do not depart at a time that is critical to the nation, to the Ummah, to the country of Lebanon. Of course we wish, and we must learn lessons from how that happened. But Hassan Nasrallah is now a towering figure in history. It took 82,000 pounds of explosive to kill him. That's because he really was quite a mountain, you know. Hassan says Galloway is a great voice for Islamic unity, and he isn't even a Muslim himself. We thank you. La shukra la wajib, Hassan. Lion of Aleppo says we Syrians are 90% what people call Sunni, and we are the heart of the resistance. There is no Sunni or Shia, only Islam. I don't care what people think. This is the commandment from Allah. Well said, Lion. We've had a call from Norma tonight. She's too ill to come on the program, but wants to ask, can George explain the difference between Sunnis and Shiites? Well, they are two parts of the Muslim world with one book, the Quran. They perform one Hajj. They pray 5 times a day. They fast during Ramadan. All these things are in common. But the schism began on who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad to the leadership. And the Shiites are the party of Ali, the son-in-law of the Prophet. They believe that Ali should have become the Imam, the leader of the Islamic world, the Caliph. But the basic religion is the same. It seems to me, why not call it sushi instead of Shia or Sunni? Call it sushi. They're all praying in one direction. They're all praying on the same mat, to the same place, the same Qibla. They are all reciting from the same Quran. They are all fasting according to the same commandments. It's about time that this sectarian division was dampened down. Davinder is in Leicester in England, but wants to talk about Hezbollah. Davinder, welcome.
Hi, George. How you doing? Love the show as usual. I've just got a few questions, more of a student of yours. One is that although Hezbollah are backed, Iran does give them, ammunition or missiles, etc. The thing that's always confused me, if they've got like high-level ballistic missiles and stuff, how come they haven't got any anti-aircraft missiles? I mean, I don't know whether they have, but it's just every time I hear...
I don't think they have. No, it's a good question. It's a legitimate question. I guess that it is too difficult to get there, to transport. That might be one very practical reason. But they have very, very limited anti-aircraft capacity. You're right. Somebody else needs to answer that. I'm not qualified. Go on, brother.
The thing, I mean, we were going on about the retaliation. I just feel that all this waiting, tip-tap, and maybe waiting for the American election, which will make no difference at all what's going on in the Middle East. And I feel like Yemen have shown the way to go forward, punch them back in the nose. And I feel that, Iran, all these countries, they keep getting, they keep getting their handicapped, the knees taken out and stuff. And the retaliation will be very limited and maybe even futile once they're on their backs. I can understand the decision they've got to make, because to sacrifice a nation, who've got very little sanction to anything, poor people who've probably got have got interest in politics, but got living, day to day, to sacrifice these people in the cause of what they count as another country is a very difficult one. But I feel that that's going to happen anyway. And they're just inching closer and closer and limiting themselves as they keep getting handicapped. And the West, they just keep pushing like they did in
Ukraine. I mean, there's another 5 days mourning in Iran. There's going to be a lot of mourning in Iran. There's already been a lot of days of mourning. But if you don't do something about it, all you're guaranteeing is more and more days of mourning. Very good call, Devinder. I'm sorry I wasn't qualified to answer. I'm also circumscribed by the law here in Britain, a very stupid law that was introduced by a Labour government in relation to this particular organisation. It's not that I fear a prosecution. Take me away now. I don't want the show to be brought down. I don't want the show to be silenced. So I have to pick my words a bit carefully. Thanks for that call, Devinder. Ellie is in New York on Nasrallah. Go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Galloway. So we have a very, very chaotic and disastrous state of affairs around the world. Anyway, I'd like to comment on what is happening here and, of course, in the Middle East. First, I would like to see if we can, when we talk about the government, we should really emphasize that the government is basically the oligarchs, or maybe I'm wrong about that. And then going to the Middle East, the events taking place there, well, Netanyahu was at the United Nations General Assembly with two maps. And one of the maps had the heading, the blessing, and the other one was the curse. So when we look at the map that is listed as the blessing, and you look at the countries that are included in this blessing, one has to wonder what exactly that means. That includes Egypt and Saudi Arabia and other parts of Africa, I think. But anyway, in my opinion, I don't think that anything that happens in the Middle East right now is completely, how can I say, that the Saudis are not aware of it. I wouldn't think the Saudis are not aware of what happens in Lebanon, in Syria, and anywhere else in the Middle East. Okay?
Well, yeah, of course, the Saudi Arabian government has committed many crimes against the Arabs, against the Muslims, against humanity. But there is a new leadership in Saudi Arabia now. And I may be wrong, but I think that the political line of Saudi Arabia, since that new leadership came to power, is better than what was there before. And it is to their credit that despite enormous American pressure, they have branched out in their relations with Russia, with China, with President Putin. President Putin and MBS, the Crown Prince, seem to get along very famously. And it's to the credit of the regime in Saudi Arabia that they are breaking the dollar hegemony. They are trading in oil with China in Chinese currency, an idea which, if it catches on, will end the US dollar as a reserve currency and will precipitate great changes for the worse in the American economy. So that's all I'm saying about Saudi Arabia. I don't know who gave the whereabouts of the Hezbollah leader to those who were able to kill him by killing a huge number of other people, by dropping 82,000 pounds of bombs on the building that he was in. I think that the onus is on the revolutionary to make it as difficult as possible for the enemy to locate him. And I don't know about the Nasrallah case, not yet anyway, but I do know about the 10 or 12 commanders who were killed a day or two earlier. They were in an apartment having a meeting in the Dahia in South Beirut. That is, in security terms, just wrong. I don't mean to cause pain, but it is just wrong. And I'm sure that they themselves know it. Ellie, thanks for the call. Alfie is in Glasgow on Lebanon. Go ahead, Alfie.
Hi, George.
Hi.
Can you hear?
Yeah, can hear you.
Right, you'll not remember me, but I talked to you a couple of times back in your Talk Sport days, and the last time I spoke to you, you cut me off, and maybe I was touching on subjects that, well, you alluded to earlier tonight, that you try to keep your show going. So I totally respect one's limited in what one can say, etc. So obviously you're going to be sitting with Gayatri shortly, doing your summary, social media thing. So not got much time to speak tonight, but hopefully moving forward, we can have a couple of wee conversations. But just a couple of things. Firstly, you're sort of on the pulse, George. Unlike the rest of the politicians in the UK, and how everyone's shut down. Free speech and all the rest of it. It's just, what country do we live in? It's getting ridiculous. Anyway, the whole 7th October thing, etc. Did you watch that? I don't know if you watched that thing during the week there about the, it was a kind of documentary with the kids at the festival down next to Gaza where it all started. Was that the BBC documentary, Will the Israelis Dance Again? Yeah, well, I guess so. And I was quite horrified because I honestly thought that the fundamental purpose of the call it an invasion, if you like, into Israel was to get hostages for, political bargaining purposes. But it was clear that it was they were just out to kill, etc., etc. On the other hand, what clearly came out was, where was the response from the Israeli forces? The 6 hours it took them to do anything, and I'm on your page, George. The Israelis wanted this to happen so they could do what they're doing in Gaza. Yeah, they wanted it to happen, and they partly caused it to happen, Alfie. There was a lot of killing on October 7th,
but a very substantial amount of it was done by the Israelis themselves to stop the taking of hostages, according to the Hannibal Directive. Look, you rightly said that I can't keep my missus waiting. I would commend my interview with Piers Morgan, in which we discussed October 7th at some length, Alfie. If you haven't seen it, I think it's better than the BBC's documentary. But thanks for the call and for your kind words. Gaza West says the greatest honour and compliment I can give to Gigi is that he's the Scottish Tony Benn. Indeed, a high honour and compliment. My good wife Gayatri has just arrived at the table, and let's see what's rattling, Gayatri.
Big show tonight, big numbers, lots of calls and lots of commentaries. We knew that, of course, when we received the confirmation of Hassan Nasrallah's assassination. Yesterday we were in the middle of a wedding, as it were, and we anticipated this big show. Obviously the poll was drafted before the confirmation. Is Hezbollah defeated?
It's quite timorous though, because since Hassan Nasrallah's murder, assassination, half the Twitterati consider Hezbollah defeated.
Yeah, but not ours. And on Patreon the same. Majority believes no, as says Olufemi Okiniyi. Hezbollah is an idea and resistance. People die, ideas don't. It is a setback, but it is not a defeat. And the point that AK makes, you can't defeat people who don't fear death. And
no,
this
that's
is the
key point. I tried to make that in my monologue.
Exactly. This is the big difference that people need to understand. These people, they glorify their martyrs. They look forward to the judgment day and meeting their creator. So, no, you can't defeat this concept. Name and number says, well, what's the provisional IRA? Hezbollah is a mightier force than the provosts at the height of their power.
Well, much more. There's 100,000 people under arms in Hezbollah, in a country of 4 or 5 million.
It's huge. Roy Douglas, this is a guaranteed escalation into a full regional war. Remember, when apartheid South Africa was crumbling, they attacked Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, and then there were assassinations region-wide. So the Zionist trespassers are regionally isolated and they look impregnable, but it is a paper tiger who cannot defend itself from old drones.
As you know, I never liked the paper tiger metaphor because it presupposes that the teeth of the paper tiger can't bite, and Israel can sure bite and will be biting for some time. But the point about the South African comparison is really very apt. I hadn't actually thought of it myself. And of course I was deeply involved both with the frontline states that you mentioned, but also with the movement inside South Africa. It looked like the apartheid regime was real strong. They invaded Angola, and they were decisively defeated there, not least by the Cuban armed forces there in alliance with the MPLA at Quito, Cuenavale. So what looked like a high point of apartheid was in fact a precursor to final defeat.
So if these are any comparisons to go by, then it is towards a good direction.
Yeah,
hopefully.
I mean, probably not quite as quickly. We remember we had a young woman on Have It Out with Galloway last week.
From Lebanon.
She was very clear that Israel was going to disappear within 2 years. I really don't believe that's true. And I do think there's an issue, and I was talking with you about it today. We have to stop overestimating our own strengths. We have to stop underestimating the strengths of our enemies. Hundreds are not thousands, thousands are not millions, and millions are not tens of millions. We have to learn better how to calibrate our strengths and our weaknesses.
I must read you this email that came in from Lebanon. It's Stephanie. She says, Mr. Galloway, from a Lebanese Christian, I tell you, it's true. Nasrallah is gone. But the resistance is not just Nasrallah. It's each and every one of us, every freedom fighter who believes that we should defeat Israel, that we cannot live next to an oppressor, next to a genocidal people who wants to annihilate the Palestinians and want a piece of our country and make us live under their boots. So no, the fight is not over. The fight has just begun. The road to freedom and liberty is paved with blood and sacrifice, and we don't expect anyone to save us. We must take things in our own hands and lights.
Well, that is the message of the night, or any night. What was the name attached to it?
Stephanie in Lebanon.
Stephanie in Lebanon, I salute you for that wonderful message. I don't like to tell you, Mrs. Galloway, but our small child has just wandered onto the set and at any moment is at risk of appearing in her pajamas on the screen. So maybe one last one.
Okay, very quickly then. This is from Ben. He says, George, I speak to close friends who don't follow the geopolitical situation as closely as I do. I talk about what's happening in Palestine and Lebanon, and they shrug their shoulders and as if it's of no concern. The attitude of the General Joe Bloggs is that this war is happening over there and that it's of absolutely no concern to them.
Until they arrive on a dinghy over here.
Well, this is it. This is why, Ben, you have to make the connection between what's happening over there to how it affects over here. Not least the 12,000 pounds we spend, for example, on nuclear weapons. That's just nuclear weapons. Never mind all the wars that were fueling into the area. And of course, as a result, people fleeing.
It's 12,000 a minute.
It's a minute.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct that first of all, our soldiers are there, our sailors are there, our airmen are there. Yeah. Their lives are at risk. Our money is paying for that military intervention when it could be keeping our pensioners warm in the winter time. And any refugee, where are these refugees headed for, do you think? Coming to a cafe near you, as am I, Gayatri.
Yes.
You and I are going to Crawley.
We are
tomorrow.
going to Crawley.
I told you if you married me, you'd see the world.
Yes.
I've taken you to Caracas, now I'm taking you to Crawley.
Yeah.
This is going to be a terrific night. Have you got the details?
Yes, it's taking place in Northgate from 6 to 10. This is in support of Linda Bamier, who's standing at the council elections. But there's going to be a barbecue provided by FS. There's going to be live music with the Go For It Tribe band. It's going to be there. It's going to be quite a gig, actually.
Yeah. It's going to be a party for the council election candidate. Linda Bamier was married, is the widow of a Palestinian ambassador, an ambassador for many decades. She's totally dedicated to the cause and totally dedicated to Crawley. I mean, she loves Crawley like it's Paris. I'm going to find out tomorrow with you whether it's Paris or whether it isn't. But we'll be there. At what time?
6 to 10.
At Effie's. Is that how you say it?
FS Northgate.
Thanks, Chips, for you later. Now, M is in Massachusetts, but on Lebanon. M, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. Yeah, I just like to comment, I'd like to make it clear that most people in the world don't really understand or appreciate just how much, or just how sacred Lebanon is. It's one of the oldest countries in the world. And most of its major cities are like some of the most ancient cities in the world. As most people don't realize that the Lebanese people historically are the descendants of the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians are the people that throughout the Mediterranean coast have attributed language and civilizations that, there would be no alphabet without the Phoenician people. And the English alphabet is called the phonetic alphabet because it's named after the Phoenicians. So to attack like these ancient cities like Baalbek, and Byblos, or any other country any other city in the Middle East, or Tyre which is Sur in Lebanon, is like an attack on, the foundation of language and civilization as we know it today, in the Western world at least. The Greeks and the Latins all got their language from the Phoenicians. The language that we speak originally comes from the phonetic alphabet, including Hebrew. So to attack Lebanon is to basically attack the foundations of language, the alphabet, and basically all biblical history, all Mediterranean history and language, and all of the basically the knowledge of the Western world that we know it today. The Temple of Solomon, for example, was built by King Hiram, who was a Phoenician king. And in the Talmud, they talk in the Sanhedrin 21b, verse 22, that the original language of the Torah, they discussed whether it was written in the sacred Phoenician Abjad, which they would call today Paleo-Hebrew, but they recognized it as the Libona script, the ancient Lebanese script, which comes from Lebanon. So a lot of Judaic history and tradition comes from Lebanon, but the Lebanese people and the Lebanese history is unique to the Lebanon, which are the descendants of the Phoenicians. So it's a violation.
Well, that's a very beautiful call. That's a very beautiful call, M. I couldn't better it. I did try to convey something of the magic of Lebanon in my opening remarks. Lebanon is deep in my heart. The Lebanese people are exceptionally dear to me. I have two sons that are half Lebanese, Syrian. The Bilad al-Sham covers Syria and Lebanon, of course. These are artificial divisions that Sykes and Picot made to divide the Arab world up, the better to exploit it, the better to give part of it away to the European settler state called Israel. So I'm not in second place to you on my love and appreciation of the beauty of Lebanon. You can drive from a snow-covered mountain and be in the Mediterranean Sea within 25 minutes. This is a place of quite extraordinary natural beauty with a quite extraordinary level of culture. Its food is almost, with all respect to my good wife, almost without peer. Its people, industrious and mercantile and hardworking. I mean, if you see a rich white man in Africa, he's almost certainly Lebanese. And my late former father-in-law was one of those in Nigeria, in many other parts of Africa and far flung across the world. There are highly successful Lebanese people who are brilliant at business and who understand how to make economic activity buzz and fly and work. Beautiful call, M in Massachusetts. Thanks for making it. Last call of the evening is Salim in the Czech Republic. Salim, welcome. We don't get many calls these days from the Czech Republic. What's on your mind?
Thank you very much, Mr. Galloway. Actually, I was calling you before from London all the time, and I was talking about Imran Khan. I have recently shifted to Czech Republic because of my amazing Czech wife. And then, first of all, I have an invitation, and at last I have a message for the people of Gaza and for the people of Lebanon. The invitation is for you, Mr. Galloway. Anytime you visit Prague, I would love to meet you. I had a dream of meeting you in England, which couldn't happen. I completed my degree and I'm in Czech Republic now. But if you do come here, please, it's a request. And number two, I feel like the media has spiked the Western world in believing that certain religion or people are bad, but the job which you are doing, it's like I must commend you for whatever you are doing. I was literally listening to your debate yesterday in the Oxford Union when a student suggested that we should educate Iraqis, and then you replied, well, Iraqis were playing with algebra when we had nothing here. I don't know how this media has spiked them. And lastly, I have a message for Lebanese people and for people from Gaza that Muslims all around the world have never forgotten you and will not forgive you. Those few leaders of us, I'm from Pakistan, those few tyrant and useless leaders of us doesn't represent us. We are always there for you and we will always fight for you. We are just waiting for people like Imran Khan who will give us the direction towards fighting for these people. Thank you very much, Mr. Galloway. I really appreciate you.
Amin. Thank you for that wonderful but final call from the wonderful city of Prague. I haven't been in Prague for precisely 24 years. It's about time I made a return visit. Salim, enjoy your time there with your good wife. Again, a big apology to this time 180 people hanging on the telephone who were unable to get on the show this evening. As Gayatri said, it's been a very, very big show on a very, very big subject, and one which has not finished yet. So join me, God willing, on Tuesday at 7 p.m. for Have It Out with Galloway. Join me on Wednesday night, God willing, at 7 o'clock for the mother of all talk shows. God knows where we'll be by then. And if you are anywhere near the shining city of a hill that's called Crawley, I'll see you there at Effie's Cafe at 7 o'clock tomorrow, or 8 o'clock, I think. I'll be there tomorrow evening. Till then, good night.